BRICs invited 6 countries to become new members. So that includes Saudi Arabia, Iran, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates.
Well, fuck.
Yeah.
That is not good, Tara. That answers my question, and it's not what I wanted to hear. I'm Stephanie Keith.
And I am Tara Manjekovic, and we are unapologetically outspoken. Okay, Stephanie, did you see there were like recent articles that came out on, I think it was Wednesday, about how like the survivors of the Maui fires were saying that the roads out of Lahaina were blocked by like utility crews and that they couldn't leave. And that's why so many people died in their cars and why there was just this like long string of burned up cars.
Yes. And it's all over TikTok.
Yes.
There was a kid, well, I say kid, he might have been in his 20s, I'm not sure, that filmed the whole thing. So it's like anyone who thinks like, oh, they're just making it up. He the whole entire time from leaving his house to getting stopped on Front Street by this blockade to ending up in the ocean for survival. The whole thing was caught on camera.
Yeah, like all of these articles started appearing like on Wednesday into Thursday. And it was like all these survivors are speaking out and they're saying like the only reason they escaped was because they defied the barriers that were in place. And people either like just said fuck it and drove around them. People drove like the wrong way down the street. Some people found like dirt roads and like ended up getting out. And they were saying like all the people who were in compliance with obeying the barricades are the ones who got trapped and couldn't escape. And like the stories these people were telling are pretty horrific. Like there were a lot of very detailed articles. And so they still can't account for over what, 1,000 missing people, even though now they say they've searched like 85% of the island and there's still over 1,000 people missing. So where the fuck are they?
Did you see the video of the reporter like getting in the face of the mayor and he was like, where's the missing children? Where are they? And the mayor's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And it's a good point because they're saying that there's a lot of children, yet like none of the bodies have been found.
Yeah. And I was talking with my boss about it yesterday, and he's like, I think they all went into the ocean to escape, and then they either drowned or got eaten by sharks. And that, so there's no bodies because they've been eaten. And I was like, well, that's fucking graphic. Like you flee a fire and it like end up either drowning in the ocean or getting eaten by sharks. But I don't know. Maybe that happened.
I mean, a lot of people did end up in the ocean.
Yeah.
And that was my thought. Like, what about these kids, if they can't swim? But then there's this whole other conspiracy theory that, remember how I said there's like all these tunnels that run underneath
Yes.
Maui and they run like under Oprah's house and Jeff
Yeah.
Bezos. Well, a lot of people, like there's this whole like pedophilia conspiracy with like rich people and celebrities and stuff. So they're like, they went into the tunnels and like, maybe the whole thing was like a distraction to like get these kids or something, which I don't believe that. Like, I think that's a very far stretch, but that's like one of the rumors going around. But another one, it was really sad because they didn't sound the alarms and they flat out said they purposefully did not sound the alarms because they didn't want to confuse people. And there was a guy who was just like totally traumatized. And he was like, if I would have just had 10 minutes notice, I could have saved the kids in my apartment building or like that housing or whatever. And he said, but there was just no time. There was barely time for him to get out. And he's like, if I would have had 10 minutes notice, all those kids I could have got.
Yeah.
And it's just devastating, and now they're like, even mainstream news is talking about the water and how the guy made a choice to not release more water because of freaking climate conservatism or whatever, where he didn't want to use up the water.
Yeah. And then you have, I mean, I was so hard for me to watch half of these news stories when fucking Biden goes over there on Monday and gives his stupid speech about his kitchen fire and then made up this whole fucking story about how you can relate to the people because his house almost burned down and his Corvette almost burned down or whatever the fuck he was saying. And then he falls asleep. He fucking falls asleep. Like,
which, by the way, I posted that video video of him falling asleep. It's like this isn't disinformation. You could see it for yourself, and TikTok freaking took it down for community violations. I'm like, this isn't misinformation. You can see it right there. The guy fell asleep.
Yeah, there was like I watched a minute long video of him just literally sitting there with his mouth open and just that full zombie thing, and then he just slowly falls asleep. I mean, how
Yeah.
fucking disrespectful can you get? But I do love that the people of Lahaina were flipping off his motorcade
Hmm.
when he was coming through, and I was like, fuck yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. They were letting it be known they didn't want him there. I mean, I think that this is a huge cover up. I think they all know they screwed up by not sounding the alarms, not releasing the water, not cleaning up that brush that should have been cleaned up, like all of that stuff. And I think, maybe they have found a lot of the bodies of children, but they're not going to release that because they know they're screwed. And like, I mean, when there's kids involved, I mean, that's when people are going to start talking about like investigate them and throw
Right.
their asses in jail.
Yeah, because there's no way you can say over 85% of the island has been cleared, but there's still 1,000 people missing,
Right.
children missing. Like
Right.
that doesn't even make sense.
Well, and the
So
only reason I think it's a cover up, and then I'll stop talking about this because I know this isn't even our topic for today, but obviously I'm obsessed with it. But the other reason why I think it is a cover up is because a woman who works in the morgue was on TikTok. And she's like, I've seen 450 bodies come through, but I don't know how they track things with DNA. Maybe things get, I don't know. And she was like trying to like not say, but say at the same time that they're lying. And
yeah.
then you find out the chief of police is also the coroner. Not only is he the Las Vegas
Really?
commissioner, he is the freaking coroner. He said it in one of the press conferences. He like let it slip out that, oh, by the way, I'm the coroner too. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is
Shady.
so shady.
Yeah. Wow. Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure even more is going to unfold over the next couple weeks. But like you said, that's not even our topic today. And I know that, for the most podcasts and media outlets are focused on the RNC debates from Wednesday night. But honestly, like, I don't have a whole lot to say about that. I had no interest in watching it. And I did see bits and pieces and I listened to commentary about it. And frankly, from what I did see and hear, I don't think I missed anything. And the only comments that I will make is that, as much as I truly like DeSantis, I think I don't know what happened to him, but he's like completely fallen from the rankings. And I think he just needs to stay governor of Florida. And I do like some of Vivek's progressive ideas for the US, especially, reorganizing or abolishing the three-letter agencies. But I don't think he's really ready to take on foreign policy. I think he's too green, especially in this current political climate. And I honestly don't think anyone else had anything interesting to say from what I did here. And I'm sorry, fuck Mike Pence. So I truly believe the only qualified candidate is Trump.
Yeah. Well, I think that's, what the polls are showing, not that those are accurate by any means, but I agree. I purposely didn't watch it because I am like boycotting mainstream news. Like I don't want to give them any more ratings or views or whatever. We don't need them anymore, and I saw plenty of clips through, social media, and it seemed like a snooze fest. I agree with DeSantis. Like honestly, I'm really disappointed in his just everything, like his demeanor, his
Yeah.
presentation, like I don't know what happened to him, but I'm glad he's staying governor. He's a great governor, and I think that's where he needs to be right now. Vivek, I freaking love this guy. I think that he will be, if he's not Trump's VP pick, he will be part of his cabinet. Like
Yeah.
he'll take some form of like major position. He had some good, he was the only one that brought personality to the
Yeah.
snooze fest. And there were a couple lines where I was like, that was amazing. And one of them was where Nikki Haley's going on and on about how we should be in Ukraine and like how he doesn't know anything. He's so not qualified. And I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something like, Well, yeah, because you can remember that when you're on the board of directors for Raytheon, like totally calling her out as being part of the, military industrial complex. And then I think he closed it out with saying, like, there's two truths. And shoot, now I'm forgetting what it was, but it was like something about America being, do you remember what it was? It was like something
I didn't
about
see that. I didn't see that part.
America being like the land of the free, or something to that effect. And then the second is that there are two genders. And
Yeah.
like the crowd went wild. And I was like, that he was like, he has personality, he's funny. And I think he'd be great teaming up with Trump. But I agree. I don't think that, he's gonna have what it takes to go up against Russia and this whole Ukraine issue and China and everything else.
Did you watch though Tucker's interview with Trump?
I did.
What'd you think
I
of that?
did. I was kind of same thing, like a little like disappointed. Like
Mhm.
it was very and I don't know, in my opinion, it was uneventful. Now that might be because I was watching it and like falling asleep at the same time because I just have not slept well the past few nights. But like it was
Me both.
very subdued, very like I don't know, he seemed off, which I don't blame him,
Yeah.
everything he's going through. He seemed kind of somber, and I think some of the questions, I'm like, why are you even bringing that up? Like, there's so many better things to talk about right now, that he was asking about like Epstein, and I'm like, why? Like, I don't know. It was just weird,
Yeah.
in my
But did
opinion.
you notice, like, I mean, Trump is so straightforward all the time. Like that guy, you ask a question and he will just like from the hip rattle off an answer. And there were several times that Tucker asked him questions and he didn't really answer the question. And like you said, he was very subdued. And I'm sure he's just listening to his lawyers at this point. And I mean, some of the things he said were great, but there were questions like when Tucker was asking if he feared for his life and stuff like that. And it was just very interesting that they were almost non-answers, which is
Yeah,
just so not what I'm used to from Trump. But
right.
I from the statistics that I saw, Trump's interview with Tucker got way more views than the RNC debates.
Oh, without a doubt. I just checked it, and this is just on X, aka Twitter, whatever. I feel so weird calling it X. I checked it a few hours ago, 229 million views. And that's not counting all the people that viewed it from other, like there were a lot of people streaming it live.
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, who knows how many people actually tuned in. But yeah, I mean, blew Fox out of the water for sure.
Yeah, I
Did
saw.
Fox report their numbers yet?
Well, I saw some stats from CBS News on Thursday evening, and they said viewership for the RNC debates on Fox was at 11 million. And then that number rose to like 12.8 million when you included Fox's streaming platforms. And that is still a far cry from the
It's like
220
nothing.
million, you know?
Right.
And that article also, the CBS News article was saying that this 11 million viewership is lower than the average viewership for GOP debates in 2015 and 2016. So clearly, we are not the only ones who were disinterested and didn't want to watch it.
Yeah. Well, Trump, he just has that X factor, like that, you can't quite put it into words, but he is a force, and none of them come anywhere close. Not even Vivek. Like he's
Yeah.
great, but none of them, come close to it. And the Tucker thing, it's like this is right before the guy's about to be arrested.
Right.
He's got the whole world, like the whole government is against him. His friends are being arrested as, very good, confident, like the people that have been there with
Oh,
him.
like Giuliani getting arrested on Wednesday.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I also think he's incredibly like, I think he's being strategic. I'm sure his lawyers are helping him with that. But when you think about it, there's so many people that would not vote for him before, that are kind of teetering on like, maybe we should, because things
Yeah.
are really messed up right now. And so I think if he were to go on and do his normal thing that turns people off, that could have hurt him. So maybe he was trying to just be like super neutral and like more appealing to everyone instead of his typical like MAGA crowd.
Yeah, and like, okay, so we're recording this Thursday night for Friday morning.
Mhm.
And while we're recording this, I guarantee you every single news media outlet is watching vehicles that are going to be transporting Trump to the Georgia courthouse, like they did with Giuliani on Wednesday. It was nonstop coverage of nothing, of nothing.
Yeah.
Waiting in front of the courthouse or watching traffic. And I guarantee you, every mainstream media outlet, that's all they're doing right now.
Well, that's because Trump is the only thing keeping them going. He's what's
Yeah,
keeping the lights on. No
yeah.
one's interested anymore in the mainstream news. Like there's so many other ways to get this information. And so yeah, they're gonna eat it up. And I'm just kind of like boycotting them. Like I don't, I'm just done. We don't need them. We know it's propaganda. Um, so yeah, I'm just gonna continue like listening through these other channels and I'm not gonna watch it.
Yeah, and while they're focusing on Trump going to jail and these incredibly boring debates, one of the important things that has been going on this week that the rest of the world is paying attention to while we're not is the 3-day BRICS summit that has been happening in Johannesburg in South Africa for the past 3 days, where you have the leaders of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who all got together to discuss the expansion of what new members they were going to accept into BRICS. And I guess Putin was attending like via video call because there's an international like arrest warrant out for him for war crimes and he couldn't travel to South Africa. But that did not stop him from having major input in this conference. So, just like a tiny bit of background, right now the BRICS nations represent around 40% of the world's population, and they contribute more than a quarter of the global GOP. And those stats are about to grow because more than 20 countries have applied to join BRICS. And in order for a country to be accepted, all the BRICS nations have to agree to the criteria and the details. And as of Thursday morning, BRICS invited 6 countries to become new members. So that includes Saudi Arabia, Iran, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, and the United Arab Emirates. And what was made very clear during this conference was a concrete policy that the BRICS nations are going to be moving away from the US dollar for trade and that they're going to use local currencies instead. So,
Okay,
what is
wait, I have a
that?
question
Yeah.
because this is what I'm still confused about. Is Saudi Arabia and these other 6 countries part of the 20 countries that applied and they're just like,
Yes.
yeah, you're good? Or
Yes.
are they just reaching out to them?
No, those were 6 of the 20 countries that applied for membership.
Well, fuck.
Yeah.
That is not good, Tara. That answers my question, and it's not what I wanted to hear.
That's exactly. Yeah. So, as I was going to say, what does this mean for the United States? Well, if you listen to White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, his view is that the BRICS countries are too divergent on critical issues because they don't all agree on a lot of things. And he's like, oh, they're not going to turn into a geopolitical rival of the US. And then I read this AP News article that was talking about calculations by the US Federal Reserve researchers who are claiming that from 1999 to 2019, 96% of trade in the Americas was invoiced in dollars, along with 74% of trade in Asia and 79% of trade everywhere else in Europe. So they're saying, oh, the dollar's not going to be taken down overnight. And okay, but considering that these statistics are all from before the Biden administration took office and single handedly destroyed not only our economy, but our relationships with other world leaders, and now these 6 new nations that are part of BRICS. These are some powerful countries from the Middle East. And so not only will BRICS be backed by gold, but they're going to be backed by countries which are rich in resources and especially in oil. And so I think the Federal Reserve researchers have their heads up their asses and they're being a little too optimistic, or they're just saying that to keep us from understanding that the economy is indeed headed for collapse. Because if we look at the facts here, Many of these BRICS countries also have very strong leaders who fucking hate the United States and would love to see our dollar collapse. And Putin has been very direct in saying BRICS needs to become the trading bloc that represents the global majority. And during this conference, he talked about how their population, the BRICS nations, accounts for over 3 billion people, which is a greater share in the global GDP than the G7 in terms of purchasing power. And over the past decade, BRICS countries have doubled their investment in the global economy, and their total exports have reached like 20% of the global total. And even though you have like Brazil and India and South Africa who are still in this mode where they're trying to keep the peace and they don't want to ruffle feathers with the US. And again, not all the BRICS nations are on the same page with this whole currency thing, but it's very clear that the strong leaders in Russia, China, and the Middle East countries are all on the same fucking page. So I think we do. I think we are in an incredibly dangerous position financially, especially now with this confirmed expansion.
Well, hell yeah. And these people are focused on real issues other than, climate change and
Right.
pronouns like the UN,
Mhm.
And I mean, I think as usual, the Federal Reserve is looking out for itself and not the American people. Um, and it's like, when you think about it, I think that if they were to acknowledge that the US dollar is clearly at risk, people are going to freak out. It's going to be chaos. They're going to pull their money from the banks. They're going to pull their money out of the stock markets, and there would be an economic collapse. So, I mean, they're not going to tell us. They're going to wait until it's too late to really do anything, and they'll probably take care of themselves, and all the elites are already doing stuff. We can talk about that. Um, but I think what we're seeing is a global shift, which honestly, like this happens. It happens every few decades forever, for as long as we have documented history. And I think that the US is going from being like the only dominant force to, I think there's going to be a split where it's going to be like the US, combined with like the UN and BRICS. And I think, there will be two global powers, but I mean, I didn't realize 40% of the population is made up in
Yeah,
these BRICS countries. Like, this is pretty powerful. And then, of course, it's backed by oil, which we don't have that because Biden refuses to drill. Um, what concerns me the most out of this summit is Saudi Arabia. And I thought they were potentially joining, but it sounds like they want
as,
to.
as of what I read this morning, they were one of the confirmed six.
So that basically means like all of our oil supply that directly impacts our cost of goods for everything, whether it's food or medicine, is going to drastically rise. I mean, I don't think people like can fully appreciate just how much this will impact prices that are already high. And I think this is why people need to be educated on this. And I can see why they want a big distraction from this,
Yeah,
why, the government doesn't want us talking about this. Um, and I'm just going to say it, like, had Trump been elected instead of Biden, I don't know about you, Tara, but I do not think we'd be in this situation right now. I
absolutely not.
like,
No.
first of all, Russia would not have dared to invade Ukraine. And Trump made it very clear what would happen if they did. They weren't going to mess with him. And China wasn't messing with Taiwan at that point. And second, we were energy independent. We were
Yeah.
drilling here. He was bringing manufacturing back to the States so that if something like this happened, we have a plan B. We're not totally reliant on them. And Biden stopped all of that. He stopped all of it on day one. So we are completely dependent on China for like our goods and all this stuff that's manufactured there. And then Russia and Saudi Arabia for oil. And so it's just,
Okay, wait, I have to ask you something. Did you hear what Biden said earlier this week when he was saying that Trump's America First policies made the United States weaker instead of stronger?
are you kidding me?
No, no, it was like a couple days ago.
Oh my God. And how? Like how would that make it? Did he probably didn't back it up with anything because he's a
He made
moron.
it. He basically said something to the effect of like, Trump's America First policy is walking away from the rest of the world. And that's made us weaker, not stronger, because what's making us stronger is apparently sending billions of dollars to the Ukraine, not taking care of our own people, and not having energy independence.
But see, that's why I think there's this whole movement with Trump, is because people want to see our government taking care of us
Yeah.
instead of the rest of the world.
Mhm.
And, so he can say that all he wants, but I think the average person is like, why are you helping Ukraine right now when we have people in Maui that need it? When we have these, homeless veterans and you're helping migrants instead? Like, I think people are kind of over this whole global agenda.
Yeah, and did you see too? I didn't take notes on it, but I saw an article the other day that the what's the organization called, FEMA, that FEMA was making statements that because of all the aid they've given to Maui, they're very low on resources. And so they're not going to have resources in the event of another disaster in the United States.
You mean the aid that they withheld from Maui because the
Yes.
people can't get it? Like
Uh-huh.
they're holding it hostage.
Yeah.
FEMA, I mean, this has really opened my eyes. I mean, I kind of knew it already, but they obviously are incredibly, incredibly corrupt. Um, and yeah, I mean, I think at this point, I think a lot of people that have any sense and are paying attention to anything going on right now realize, I might not have liked Trump's tweets or his personality or his orange skin or whatever, but he had solid policies that were good
Mhm.
for America. They were America first. And I think that's what people want. And it kept the dollar strong. And that directly impacts every single American, even the extreme left liberals are impacted by that in a positive way. And this is a fact. I mean, we can debate about his personality, but you can't debate about the fact that the economy was stronger, the dollar was stronger, we were safer, we were at peace with the world, and now everything's gone haywire under Biden. And I think that sometimes people look at like, well, we're partnered, we're part of the UN, and so we can be safe and comfortable because it's all these, nations united together. When the reality is America had been pretty much leading that. And then you have other countries like Germany that are supposed to be strong, and they're on the verge of an economic collapse themselves. I mean, it's happening already. And, so things are getting really scary with the economy, and not to like add to everyone's fears, but again, I think we all need to be educated and wake up to what's going on. Warren Buffett sold $8 billion worth of stock. Michael Burry, which was that guy from The Big Short that like he predicted the 2008 housing market crash,
Yeah.
he just bet against the S&P 500 to the tune of $1.6 billion. So
And
if you're going
these
to
are
bet
money
against it,
people. These are money people.
oh yeah, and he was right with the housing market crash. Every single economist called him crazy, and he was right. And he made so much money off of that. You think he's going to bet $1.6 billion if he wasn't damn sure there's going to be a crash? And I'm going to throw in, I got to even it out with, information that's not disinformation, according to these economists. But the economists don't think a recession will happen this year. But in 2024, which is not that far away, it moves up to a 50% chance. I might add, these are the same economists that also didn't think that the housing market was going to crash in 2008, and it did. So I'm just going to put that out there. I don't know about you, Tara, but I've been busy selling all my stocks. So like, I mean, this is the reality, and you got to make some smart decisions right now.
Well, yeah, and another thing that happened during this conference, this BRICS conference, both China and Russia were very outspoken about their opinion of the United States. And, like I said earlier, South Africa and Brazil, they're trying to keep the peace. But Putin played like a 17-minute pre-recorded speech on the opening day of the conference where he like laid into the US over the sanctions that, we placed on Russia for invading Ukraine. He blamed the West for the war. We already know that Russia is blaming the US for COVID that we talked about,
Right. And so
earlier.
is China.
And so was China, right? And speaking of China, Xi Jinping said the world was being controlled by the US and the West, and that we were flexing the strongest muscles and had the loudest voices. And there was an article in Reuters yesterday where Xi Jinping said, the world has entered a new period of turbulence and transformation. And we, the BRICS countries, should always bear in mind our founding purpose of strengthening ourselves through unity. So, on top of that, right now, BRICS is being chaired by the South African Prime Minister. But guess what's happening next year in 2024? Russia is taking over as the chair of BRICS, and they're going to be hosting the 2024 summit in Kazan. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but it's in Russia next October. So if you don't think that's going to change things up as well, stand by.
Yeah. Well, and this just made me think of one other thing in the Tucker interview that made me like, I didn't know this. I'd never heard it before, but Trump was saying how, I mean, he did create a lot of peace, like especially in the Middle East. And he went and talked with North Korea and kind of like calmed that situation down. But what he said was that he was moving towards a plan of denuclearization, where he was going to get these nations to agree to basically like damage the nuclear weapons, and like so it's not even on the table. And he said he talked to both Xi Jinping and Putin, and he said Putin actually liked the idea, and I believe him.
Yeah.
And so it's like, again, things like could have been so different
Because
had he been
instead,
reelected.
instead we're giving nuclear weapons to the Ukraine.
Well, and Iran.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then Afghanistan has like we created this mess. So when Xi Jinping is saying like the US is controlling the world, yeah, like I get where he's coming from. I mean, we've done a lot of
Damage.
shit. And now like I think American citizens are waking up to it, and it's like I think Trump could have gotten us on the path away from that, but now Biden's just screwed things up like super bad. But there is one thing that is still giving me hope, that China is not as like financially solid as they let on. And there's really like two emerging threats right now that could absolutely cripple them and then, weaken BRICS. But the first thing, and we've already talked about this before, is their aging population and how there's not enough young people to replace the retiring population and then care for the elderly. And I think that they've kind of addressed that. Like they found a workaround with like the creepy AI robots that are going to be, created to take care of the elderly. So that might be not as catastrophic as we thought a few months ago. But the second thing is that they are on the verge of a housing market collapse. And I was looking it up. There's all kinds of headlines out there like China is on the edge of fallout from real estate crisis. That was the New York Times. And then Business Insider said China's economic growth is collapsing. I think it's a bigger deal than we realize. And again, like there's so many other things that have been distractions. But I want to give a shout out to a TikTok account called Cancel This Clothing Company. This guy's freaking awesome, and he backs everything up with articles and documentation and everything. And he compiled all of these articles on this issue. So one of China's biggest developers, like real estate developers, is called Evergrande. And apparently they defaulted on their loans in 2021. And it didn't seem like a big deal at first, but looking into it, 70% of China's like money is tied up in the real estate market, 70%. And so this can become a huge economic crisis for them. And to put it into perspective, in 2019, Goldman Sachs estimated China's real estate market at $52 trillion, which is like twice the size of the US market. And, the whole reason this happened is because the banks in China weren't giving like any interest on savings. And apparently it's really hard to invest in the stock market for the Chinese. It's not seen as reliable, and it's not easy because there's like all these different currency controls. So the majority of the population started investing their money in real estate. And the effect of this is that 1/5 of urban housing in China is empty, completely vacant. An article from Insider says they have 65 million homes unoccupied, which is enough to house the entire population of France. And if you look at like pictures online, there are entire towns that are just like empty ghost towns and like half finished skyscrapers all over the country. And that developer that defaulted, Evergrande, they just filed bankruptcy this month. So Tara, like shit is hitting the fan for China. And what's happening is Chinese people are now going on this massive mortgage strike. And according to this website called theconversation.com, people are refusing to pay between 150 and 370 billion dollars in home loans. And so basically what happened is like China allowed these developers to pre-sell these homes before they ever broke ground. And now people are basically that like did the pre-sale are paying 5 to 6% interest on a mortgage for a house that's never even been built and they'll never be able to live in. So they're like, screw this. Like, I'm not going to pay it. And I don't blame them.
Yeah.
So it's just escalated really quickly and it's going to collapse their entire economy because property accounts for 20 to 30% of China's GDP. And then all of their local governments get 40% of their revenue from land sales. So the majority of assets that the Chinese people hold are in property again because they don't do savings because of there's no interest and they don't do the stock market. So like this whole thing that they created, this house of cards is just like toppling down really quickly. And apparently like no one taught them about, diversifying their investments, not putting all their eggs in one basket, and it's just completely falling apart. And this is like, okay, so this is crazy. So Tara, if the average Chinese salary is $1,000 per month, what do you think the average apartment would cost to like buy it?
Well, I I don't know, 50, 60,000. Although that seems really low. I don't know, 100,000
$300,000. $300,000 and you make
for an apartment.
$1,000 a
Yeah,
month.
that's crazy.
Yeah. And like apparently in China, it's normal for families to like pool all their wealth together. And then they have like multiple generations all living together under one roof. And I guess like it's a necessity for men to purchase a home. Otherwise, they can't get married because there's like not enough women for men because of the whole thing they did like a while back where, they weren't allowing people to have kids.
Yeah.
So anyhow, like all this stuff that they've done has just like compounded over time and now it's collapsing. It's totally collapsing. And what people were doing is buying like their apartment or their home in a big city close to where the jobs are, but then taking all of their savings and buying an apartment in a smaller city where it's cheaper. And now these buildings aren't going to be built and they're like screwed. So yeah, I think that the whole China being like this big bad wolf is still the case, and definitely their military and everything is built up. But I think that this is a very real economic collapse that's happening for them and is not going to look good for BRICs. So
Well, maybe Biden's making an agreement to, buy all of the materials to build 15-minute cities here in the United States. And then they can
yeah,
get some
probably.
back.
Probably. Oh, I don't know. Like I've just been thinking if Saudi Arabia joins, which I
They
guess they
did.
are, and then if Biden stays in office or really any Democrat that doesn't want domestic oil, the dollar is going to collapse
Yeah,
without a doubt. But maybe that's what they want because then CBDC, digital currency,
exactly. That's
and
and
we won't have a choice. Like we'll
no,
have to do it.
yeah, it's coming. I know it's coming.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of the plan. And maybe that's why they're spending so much money. I heard a girl the other day and she was like, if you were going to file bankruptcy, what would you do? You would go and spend as much on your credit cards as possible.
Go shopping.
What's our government doing?
shopping in the Ukraine.
Sending all of our money to the Ukraine. Yeah, human trafficking.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that, speaking of that, like we have stuff about that to talk about too, but we'll save that for next week.
Oh my gosh, we have like so much to talk about. We're gonna have to do some extra like Patreon episodes or something because it's like shit's getting real. All right. Well, that's our doom and gloom for Friday, as usual. I would love to say we're gonna have better news on Monday, but I don't think we will. I think, it's like Trump's getting arrested and yeah, we'll keep everyone posted.
See how long he
Uh
stays in jail.
right. I think everyone should maybe just take a little peek at your stocks and your bank accounts and just start thinking about what you want to do. And we'll see everyone back here on Monday. So thanks for tuning in. If you're sick of all the crazy shit going on in our country and you want to express your support and patriotism for the show, head on over to our Etsy store at UO Patriot Chicks and check out our new stickers. The link can also be found on our website. If you love the show and you want exclusive episodes, support the podcast and join the conversation by becoming a member of our Patreon community. We'll be posting weekly member-only podcast episodes and content that isn't available on the weekly podcast. Every Patreon member will also get a free Unapologetically Outspoken sticker and updates about our new sticker release before they're made public. And be sure to follow us on TikTok at Unapologetically Outspoken. And if you haven't done so already, please rate and review the podcast. The more you support us, the more people we can reach. So help us spread the word.